Hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another installment of my ongoing series, Valiant to the Last, which is a weekly series where I basically read and review the entirety of the Valiant Comics universe for the first time ever. This week I have been reading a series called Savage, and I set this as our homework last time after reading The Forgotten Queen, simply because I didn't really know much about the series Savage. I guess it's kind of like a caveman doing caveman-y stuff, and I thought, hey, maybe it's going to be linked to this whole thread of immortal comics I've been reading. Right, important discovery number one. It's nothing to do with that at all. It's got nothing to do with the Eternal Warrior. It's got nothing to do with the Forgotten Queen. And important discovery number two, it has nothing to do with the Valiant universe. This is probably the most self-contained, un-Valiant universe-related Valiant comic I have read so far over the last 50 weeks. Um, this is even less, I guess, linked to the Valiant universe than Britannia. Now, Britannia was very much of an out of continuity standalone, but even there, it had hints of things like the Dead Side potentially, I guess, and some of the Valiant comics kind of hinted towards, or rather, didn't kind of have an issue with this idea of a Roman detective and that sort of thing. But Savage is completely its own thing, and it was an interesting read. It had high points, dizzying high points and crushing low points. And I'll talk you through that one at a time. So to start off with, the Savage series starts off with a four-issue miniseries from 2016 to 2017, written by B. Clay Moore. I'll be honest, I went into it with a little bit of skepticism. B. Clay Moore wrote the KI6 Killers miniseries that I reviewed several weeks ago, and I'm a bit on the fence as to whether or not he's any good or whether or not he's actually shit as a writer. Um, Having read Savage, I can confirm that he's actually. Before I get into that, let me explain what Savage is. Does anyone here remember Turok? Turok Dinosaur Hunter. I may well be showing my age, but Turok Dinosaur Hunter was a launch game that came with the Nintendo 64 back in 1997, 1998, I think. And at the time, I bought a Nintendo 64, or rather had it bought for me. And one of the first games I got as a teenager was this. I was really excited to be playing Turok. It's basically you in some kind of crazy savage land fighting dinosaurs. In retrospect, it's a terrible game, but at the time, I thought it was the best thing ever. What I didn't know at the time is that Turok was based on a Valiant comic. I say Valiant comic. I mean, realistically, Turok actually was originally published by a completely different comic company back in the day. I think someone called Gold Key Comics, from what I gather. And essentially, it's kind of a Conan meets Tarzan in a prehistoric setting kind of story. Anyway, so that was Turok. Then in 1992, when Valiant Comics first launched in their original incarnation, they introduced a revamped Turok. Some guy fighting dinosaurs in like a dinosaur-infested savage land. That was that. And then when Valiant went through a major restructuring because it wasn't doing well, it got bought by Acclaim Comics in 1997, who relaunched a new Turok series. That lasted for a couple of years. I've not read any of these. Subsequently, Valiant went bust, as we know, and by the time it got relaunched in 2012, it then actually no longer had the rights to Turok. The rights to Turok had been sold, and in fact, I think Turok comics are currently now being printed by either Dark Horse or Dynamite. I forget which. Anyway, my point is that Turok is no longer a thing that exists that Valiant can use. So, as such, from what I gather, they've essentially created a brand new character called Savage, which is basically Turok 2.0, someone living on a dinosaur-infested island fighting dinosaurs. Okay, let's get back into it. So this is it. I was reading series one and four issues, about an issue or so in, I was like, oh, hang on, that's what this is. This is like a reboot of Turok, but using a completely different name, and therefore avoiding copyright infringement. Okay, fine, fair enough. Maybe it's good. I've never read the original Turok comics. I will say this four-issue miniseries is good. P. Claymore does a good job. It's well written. It's very well drawn. The pacing and the characterization of the characters and sort of the steady exposition is just right. It doesn't tell you too much. It doesn't tell you too little. It doesn't have like massive info dumps of what's going on. It gives you enough just to keep you interested. And it is a good, solid story. I would highly recommend Savage 2016, the four-issue miniseries. This then brings us into Savage Volume 2, which is the second four-issue miniseries that came out in 2021. This wasn't written by B. Claymore, this was written by Max Bemis, and I went into it quite optimistic, going, oh, Max Bemis, I love him. And then I realized actually, no, I wasn't thinking of Max Bemis. I was thinking of someone else entirely. I was thinking of Max Landis, who is the writer behind Superman American Alien, which is part of the New 52. And so I thought, okay, I can't remember who Max Bemis is. Um, I did after reading this four-issue miniseries because he's shit, and I don't like him. In my opinion, he's not a good comic writer. And oh my God, this series was terrible. It's it's easy for me just to point at it and go, this was poor characterization, this was poor pacing, this was poor writing. It's easy for me to point at it and say that this is the kind of the product of a writer who's desperate to try and feel relevant and contemporary, constantly talking about social media, trying to throw in slang, trying to throw in sort of how young people talk and so on. A ridiculously caricatured and quite offensive set of idioms of what he thinks British people speak like. British people don't say the things that they say in this comic. It's absolutely ludicrous. And I could point to all that and say that, oh, this is just a rubbish writer just ruining what could have been a really good story. But I think that also misses a step. Keep in mind that in 2016, when the original Savage miniseries came out, Dinesh Samdasani was the head of Valiant. This is Valiant in its heyday. This is Valiant doing brilliantly. This is Valiant ever since the 2012 relaunch under Dinesh's authorship, all the way up until it still carried on being amazing in 2016. And actually, I think the original Savage series shows that. In 2018, of course, DMG Entertainment picked up Valiant, much the way that Acclaim Entertainment picked up the original Valiant back in the 90s. And as I've said several times across these videos, it looks like DMG are just fucking a Valiant into the ground. They're ruining it. They're not releasing deluxe hardcovers. A lot of the series released or written or designed after the DMG takeover seem to be quite poor. So, for example, the most recent version of Harbinger, the Livewire series, they basically ruined Harbinger Wars 2 halfway through, from what I can tell. And the general trend that I'm finding with Valiant Comics is that everything that came out after DMG is plummeting off a cliff in quality. I mean, let's not even think about the most recent series of Ninjak. Dear God, the artwork and the story was awful. So, with that sort of going off a cliff, when I'm looking at this, when I'm looking at a Savage 2021, it's like this 2021 series feels like a really good example, not just of in my opinion, poor writing, poor pacing, and just a desperation to stay and be relevant. What it feels like to me is something which is symptomatic of the DMG era of Valiant Comics, which is a real shame. And the fact that I and hopefully we have read both of these miniseries in the same week means that in some ways we've actually tracked through the progress and the rise and the fall of Valiant Comics. Season one of the Savage from 2016, great story, surprisingly good story. I wasn't expecting much from it, but it was good. It was dark. There was a moment right there, hit me right in the feels, I've got to say. Um, but the second one, which was in 2021, very much a byproduct of DMG editorial and their opinion and so on. It just sucked. It was trying to be cool. It was trying to be edgy and relevant and appeal to the youth, and it was terrible. So where does this leave me? Well, I very much hope this isn't collected as a deluxe edition hardcover because I'd have to rip half of it out. It's unacceptable, and I wouldn't keep the second half of the Savage issues because they're just terrible. The first four issues, the first miniseries from 2016, is good. It is well worth reading, well worth picking up as a trade paperback. Is it worth me getting custom bound as a deluxe edition hardcover? I don't know. There's a lot of effort. Maybe there's a few other non sequitur things I want to just throw all together in one. Maybe I'll do that. But for now, I'm just glad that I read it. I enjoyed it. And yeah, it's a bizarrely bipolar kind of reading experience across these two different series or two different volumes of the same series by different authors in different eras of Valiant Entertainment's lifetime, I guess. Okay. Hopefully that all made sense. Hopefully that was interesting. If you haven't heard of Savage, hopefully that tells you what you might be interested in reading and what you might not be interested in reading. From my perspective, let's look at our homework for next time. And I think for next time, what I'd like to do is dive back into deluxe edition hardcovers. Specifically, I'm thinking next time round, let's read Archer and Armstrong Deluxe Edition, Volume 1. I think this came out in 2012 or 2013, way back in the early days of Valiant. Let's jump all the way back and let's get into some Archer and Armstrong fun. Um, Makes sense given we've just covered, I think, all the Eternal Warrior comics. Let's dive into another one of the Immortal Brothers. So, with that in mind, if you have that, please read that for next time, and I'll catch you then. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.